It doesn't look like Mr. Campbell has shown up, so I'll give at least a brief update. As far as I know, there's been a lot of work going on bringing repeaters up to date. There's work going on at Ord and some work going on at Mingus, I believe, and recently. And I think those are all fixed now. Um, if anybody else knows any different, just let me know.
Well, the mic core was swapped back in at Ord, and then the link between Ord and Mingus was fixed.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so I think everything else is pretty much working. I don't think we have anything down right now. Um, other than that, we have, I think, what, 8 or 9 people here in the room. So a good turnout. And it looks like we have 8 or 9 people online. So good turnout there, too. And this evening, we have Dave Pivin, and he'll be presenting, talking about Cold War satellites. And so I think this is going to be pretty interesting. And we don't always have ham radio related topics, but I think that maybe some aspects of this might have a little bit of hint of radios involved. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Might take a second here. No. Need to move that. Here we go. Okay, can you hear me now?
I think so.
Good. Okay, my name's Dave Pivin. I'm a retired engineer. My engineering career started out when I became a technician. I went to a 2-year trade school to learn radio and TV repair. Got my first class FCC license and worked in a broadcast station on weekends while I was going to school. After that, I became a tech at Honeywell, working on reader punch units, card readers, card punches. Got drafted, joined the Navy instead, became missile fire control technician. Made a couple of trips over to Vietnam. After I got out, I took a part-time job, a summer job at Hughes Aircraft, testing antennas. Antennas for the F-14, F-15. Right above LAX, there's an antenna range there where we would mount the antennas in the window and do radiation patterns, tune up all of the joints, balance everything, because it was a tracking type planar antenna. After that, I went to school full-time, UC Irvine, and got a job as a co-op engineer, design engineer at Ford Aerospace. Worked on a lot of military stuff, space hardware, tank system with aircraft type search radar and tracking radar. That was all in California. When I got tired of the crowds and the high real estate prices, in 1980, I moved back to New Hampshire, got a job at Centronics, the printer company, designing their circuits. That led to a job as a field apps engineer for Motorola. Got transferred here to Phoenix in 1988. Continued to work for them till things got really tough back in 2000. Managed to land a job at a small startup here in Tempe, doing temperature sensors for PCs. And they folded, and I wasn't quite ready to quit working yet, so I got a job at Apple Retail as a genius. So the picture on the right is my shack when I was going to electronics school. I built a night kit receiver, and right next to it, built into a high voltage cage from a TV, is my 80 meter CW transmitter. Can't quite make out the key, but I still have my Vibraplex. It's now a relic. So I started out as WN1AGE, got a technician license, WA1AGE. When I moved to California, traded that in for WB6CCI. And mostly I was working the VHF. I still have my 6 meter AM transceiver, Utica 650, sitting in the garage. And before I left to come to Arizona, I had N1CJR, and I was using that, working repeaters and using the phone patch. This is in the days before cell phones. I stay busy today. I'm a webmaster for Greater Phoenix Mensa and the USS Truxton Association. So this is the title page. You'll notice it's got all these fancy markings on it. This is what a cover sheet would look like for the documents that most of the presentation is based on. So in the news recently, you've heard a lot of information about classified documents and top secrets and compartments. This particular information is part of special intelligence, and its compartment was named Talent Keyhole. Talent was the original space or photographic intelligence gained from aircraft. When they started using satellites, they added the keyhole designation. And that K in keyhole happens to be the file type, KMZ, that Google used to operate their Google Earth platform. And there'll be more references to that. Okay, so what I've done is anything that appears on the screen that would have been classified as top secret is marked top secret, even though all of this has been declassified. So this started out when I happened to be watching a Channel 12 news program, and it led me on this online adventure, exploring the information about satellites being used for gathering intelligence. There wouldn't have been much information about this at the time because it was top secret. Uh, Even though there were physical entities around, like the satellites that got launched, they had cover program names. And what we're going to be talking about today is an aspect of that was built right here in Arizona. So the calibration program involved a lot of elements, being able to measure resolution, to correlate it with locations on the Earth, understanding the fact that you're moving in space, looking at a spot on the ground that's moving along, and it's not flat. You have to correct for all of that to get good location information, but also the size. So what this program was designed to do was to provide the capabilities to assess Russia and China's weapon systems during the arms race. The technologies developed over the years since the Cold War have given us the ability to explore the Earth in even greater detail, even on our mobile devices, like the one I'm using today. I have a whole list of links, and I can email that to anyone that sends me a request. It is just a PDF with all of the links used to put this presentation together. So this is the video, and we'll see if the audio comes out. There it is. So this article that video led into was written by Arizona Republic reporter Scott Craven in 2016. It started with the April 2004 discovery of some crosses on the ground by a pilot, Leslie Owen. She was practicing her navigation skills, and she was looking at the navigation chart that you see on the upper right, which doesn't really show much of anything, especially targets that are that small, only 60 feet on a side, and with a marker at the center giving its location and identification. So she saw it when she was flying over. There you can see it from approximately the same altitude. It does stand out in the desert. It's 60 feet wide. The leaves of this cross are 25 feet by 16 feet. And at the center is the USGS survey marker identifying it. This one's called X47. And I'll show you more detail about that later. So in this 16-mile square grid, and southern part of Casa Grande, but also including parts of downtown Casa Grande when they were put in, there's a collection of over 270 concrete markers resembling a Maltese cross. They were installed on the ground uh, in the years 65, 66, but the Corona program hadn't really taken off yet. So what they were intended for,
What
and
type of
the
bulb does she
purpose
have
was
in it?
stated at
Question
the
mark.
time, is that they were to help calibrate photographic surveys from aircraft at various altitudes. But the reconnaissance program that did partially make use of it was a top secret program, and it was not declassified until 1992. So a lot of people got interested in this to go out and visit the site. And one in particular, Mike Klein, he's an avid desert hiker, and he posted his marker finding adventures on YouTube. Some of them are quite far away from any roads, or they're up on a hillside. So this whole story reveals that the U.S. was committed to develop the technology necessary to learn everything about the location of fixed and mobile missile launch sites, nuclear submarines, bombers, and bombers were capable of reaching the U.S. Today we just look at Google Earth. This is a Google Earth plot with the overlay of all of the locations. And I'll be talking in detail about each one of them. But first, a little talk about the OSS, which became National Intelligence Authority that evolved into the Central Intelligence Agency.
Is the light bulb loose? Question mark.
And at the beginning of the Cold War. In 1955, some of you may have heard about the U-2 program. It was started under authority of the Central Intelligence Agency Act of 1949, giving them the ability to spend unvouchered or covert government money. They were not accountable for
Try a different bulb once it cools down.
how much they spent or what they spent it on. It was a blank check, so to speak. So in 56, the U-2 became operational with the cover story of being a high altitude research aircraft, and it began flying over the Soviet Union. In 1957, a year later, Sputnik was launched, and the whole ballgame changed. So the SAMO system was set up as a spy satellite, but it was abandoned as the primary surveillance method because they didn't get enough resolution, and the Corona film-based program was started. So we were launching film-based cameras into orbit, and they would drop the film canisters for recovery by a plane. In February 1959, the first Discoverer program launch. This was the cover name for the Corona program. The first 12 launches on the Atlas rocket were failures. The 13th one was a successful flight, and that led to many more over the years. In 1960, the U-2 spy plane launched from Pakistan was shot down. And they made a big deal in Russia about capturing the pilot and putting him on trial. So the program was spurred on by the fact that we were not able to gather photographs using the U2. In August 1960, the first recovery of film from the Corona KH-1 satellite that had a ground resolution of 40 feet.
Wow.
And you can see in the picture on the right, the aircraft with a kind of a hoop on the back flew over and caught the parachute and hauled it back on board with nobody the wiser. In 1960, Kennedy was elected. He spoke of the missile gap with respect to the communists. In 61, Yuri Gagarin was put into orbit. In May of that same year, the Apollo program started. As far as the satellites go, the KH-2, 3, and 4 followed in the next 3 years with better ground resolution than the first satellite. They improved their optics. In October of 62, the U-2 photographed Russia's Cuban missile deployment, which was quite a disturbing event that led to the standoff with the Russians removing their missiles. From 1963 to 69, they worked with an improved version of the KH-4 with ground resolution of 9 feet. And they used the Casa Grande site for calibration. Mostly you're trying to determine the correlation between the photograph and the actual location on Earth. This is done automatically with software today for the Google Earth database. A KH-4B launched in 67, worked through 1972 at a 6-foot ground resolution. And critical knowledge of the Soviet and Chinese capabilities was gained, leading to reduction in nuclear arms. In 72, they had the strategic arm limitation talk. So the first success of the space capsule being caught made the front page of the New York Times, ironically on the same date that Gary Powers got a 10-year sentence. And there's also another article on there that the Russians orbit a satellite carrying 2 dogs and television. So this is what the flight of the Corona mission looks like. The satellite is put into a polar orbit. It takes its pictures. It's given pre-programmed commands when to start, when to stop as it goes through its orbit. When it's ready to drop a payload, it just orients itself, ejects the satellite or the nose cone, and at about 60,000 feet, it begins its descent by parachute. So it's a reentry vehicle, but it has a parachute like most of them do today. And it would be recovered by the aircraft at 15,000 foot level. So there were, and I'm getting to that right now. The first one had just 1 canister. All the rest had 2, and a tremendous amount of film. You have 2 rotating drums that have the film going through them. And the drums are synchronized so that they're aimed at the same spot on the ground as they pass over. and they're taking two pictures simultaneously and then sweeping perpendicular to that. You can see the arrow on there shows the direction of flight. So the thing to point out here is that it has 31,500 feet of 70 millimeter film. A substantial weight. Basically, they would go through it within a matter of days. So this is not a long-term thing. This is a mission goes up, shoots a bunch of pictures, sends the capsule down, shoots more pictures, shoots the other capsule down. Yeah, it was pretty high tech for the time. The cross section of the satellite, you have a film supply cassette at the bottom, and it threads through some like a tape recorder. There's two rotating drums, and the lenses are on the left-hand side looking at the ground, and this gives you a stereo view of everything that it looks at. The film gets processed through and is taken up into these cassettes in the separate modules, and they're both get ejected independently. The first one with a single canister is located at the Smithsonian. It's about 40 inches in diameter, so it's fairly big. All right, this is a sample of a single mission in 1965, and all the rectangles are where they took pictures. Some places they took more than one, the same area. So primarily, and I guess fortunately, Russia and China are right along the same area of the Earth. And they took pictures going all the way down through Pakistan and other parts of Southeast Asia, and all the way to the tip of Russia. And that one in the upper left there, we're going to see that picture a little bit later on. A bit about resolution. In the 50s, when they were really getting serious about photographic interpretation, a criteria was developed to where you should be able to, with a certain ground resolution, recognize, identify, and describe various objects, such as a submarine, aircraft, headquarters buildings, a missile site, a radar, or vehicles. The best resolution on here is exceeded today, but the KH-4B satellite, it didn't get to less than a meter, but it was able to detect a lot of things. The pictures below are from more contemporary sources, showing you the difference between a 10 centimeter, 25 centimeter, 50 centimeter, and 100 centimeter resolution. What you may be used to looking at today on Google Earth is in the 30 centimeter range. They get better resolution when they do flyovers, and that's added in and merged into the databases. So this is a technical spec for the KH-4C camera. Each unit has 15,000 feet of 70 millimeter film. 10-foot of ground resolution. And this outlines what it can detect, identify, and confirm. So this is good enough to identify and confirm airfields, new aircraft, different types. In 1969, they did some scans across a Soviet submarine base, Severodvinsk. That picture on the lower right is from that flight. We can get the same thing today on Google Earth with much better view. This is in the same area, Google Earth picture showing two decommissioned submarines in that same harbor. With Google Earth, people can create overlays. These were done by amateurs and contributed to the database. Okay, getting back to the grid. Casa Grande downtown is right at the top center. I-10 comes down and splits to Interstate 8 just to the southeast of Casa Grande. And you'll notice there, one of the circles there, yellow circle, is right there at the intersection, and it's visible from Interstate 8. Most of the markers have been disturbed or removed because they sit in farmland or they're in the middle of town. But many of them still remain, probably over 100. You can find something still there. This is target X47. The designations come from across the top is the column number and then the row number. So there's target X47 sitting at the intersection of Montgomery Road and Cornman Road in Casa Grande. This is a Google Earth picture, and you might be curious as to, well, how accurate is Google Earth and where it places things? And what they found is that it's better than 5 feet for horizontal and height when compared to a GPS receiver. So it can really be trusted. So I took the reading of where that was and compared it to where the marker for that USGS marker was. And let's go to that, X47. This is the data sheet with their own photograph overlaid on it at the National Geodetic Survey Data Explorer. They have these pictures on their webpage. And this is the station result. This is your actual data that shows where it's located. And that compares pretty accurately to what the Google drop point was. Okay, let's go back here. This shows the one near Interstate 8 and one that's in the mountains. The ones that are in the mountains, they had to haul the little bit of concrete that they brought in, the water, and they used local rocks to fill in those triangles. And that's an official USGS marker in the center. Okay. So let's compare one of the first images that they got, and it's a very important image in that that's a Soviet uh, base that was very close to the U.S. In the northeast portion of Soviet Union at the time. On the right is a picture from Google Earth. These pictures change with time. That one is fairly clean, but not a real high resolution. So this location is 320 miles to Alaska and 2,400 miles to Seattle. So that's a short flight. And during the Cold War, they had bombers there that could be over Alaska and do whatever they wanted. So using Google Earth, you can zoom in and see the runway, and you see planes on the runway. And you can even use Google Earth Pro to take measurements. So this is 230 feet wide. Those are standard runway casting blocks. Still visible today, although I don't think they use it for much of anything related to nuclear war. Google Earth has a tremendous capacity for information that you can explore constantly. There people have set up Facebook groups to show things that they've discovered. This site, Google Sightseeing, is where I found out about the submarines. So since Corona, the usage of satellites has shifted from film to electro-optics. Starting in the 70s, the KH-11 satellites became operational. These are gigantic satellites. The first ones were put up using the space shuttle, similar to the Hubble, because they were about the same size. In February 95, President Clinton declassified the Corona program, and the GPS systems became operational and public. And that has really allowed things to take off as far as civilian use of the satellite information. In 2010, the picture on the right was the view of Osama bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad, made by the CIA. In 2018, the next generation of the KH satellites began, and there have been 5 launches of these satellites, each with improved capabilities. Give you an idea of the size, the original KH-4 was launched on a small Agena rocket platform. They gradually grew in size until they had to launch something the size of the Hubble. And now they're launched by the largest launch system that we have. So this is a speculative look at what the satellite looks like. There's solar panels, there's a propulsion system to maintain orbit, there's communications to the ground. But basically it's a big telescope tube with a mirror. Amateur satellite trackers keep track of these There's no secret about when they're going to be launched because they come up off of Vandenberg. They're in orbit. It's an elliptical and polar orbit from 160 to 320 miles. So the recent KH-11 launch was launched from a Delta IV Heavy. This is the predecessor to the one that they're getting ready to launch, the Artemis. The satellite USA 224 was launched January 20th, 2011 from Vandenberg. It replaced the previous generation satellite, and none of those older satellites are in use anymore.
That's what they said.
The mission patch kind of looks like the launch itself. The way this rocket operates, it releases a lot of hydrogen before it lights. And so there's a burn off of all the hydrogen, and it guarantees that it's going to take off with thrust. They've done other launches, 3 more of these same size satellites. And the most recent was 2021.
And now for something completely different.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about some more satellites. These are commercial ones. There's a lot of money to be made in this business. The resolution currently is 30 centimeters, about a foot, but the resolution they're capable of will continue to increase. The difference between these and the ones launched by military is that these are multispectral type scanners. They use various bandwidths of light so that they can do exploration for minerals or watching out for harvests, things of that nature. Anybody can buy these, even the Russians. So some samples. This is 50 centimeters, and it's mono. This is a refugee camp in Jordan. This is a picture of Buenos Aires, Argentina, and you can see cars on it. You can make out what could be people in it, but this is only 50 centimeters resolution. This one from Dubai in 30 centimeters. And you can definitely make out people and identify cars as differentiated from trucks. You might even be able to see a tennis ball on the court there. Here's one locally. Davis Monthan, all these busted up B-52s. And that was done as part of the agreement where you had to prove that you disabled all of these aircraft. And that's with 30 centimeter resolution. You seem to look like a bright fellow. Have you considered joining Mensa? Is that the group with genius IQs? Precisely correct. I'm president of the local chapter. If we're so smart, why do we work here? Intelligence has much less practical application than you think. Okay. One thing I thought of as I was going through is you probably want to know what the resolution is today. And it's better than 10 centimeters. Just like our electronics is shrinking down with the nanometers, the resolution, the space, and it's incredible to think that these photographs are taken from hundreds of miles above, yet you can see things 6 inches. Okay, I have all of these reference links and links to the videos of the guy who went to the sites. And I have this all in a PDF that I can email to anyone. This is the KML file for the submarines location. And it's just another version of XML, if you're familiar with the programming language. XML, HTML, they all look similar. Here's an error I found. That's a standard topographic map, and it marked the actual X47 location as X48. Yeah, there's a whole bunch more information about this and the pictures that were taken. This is one that our satellite took of the Pentagon, and you can see the parking lots were pretty full. Yeah. Parking lots that are the white areas on the top and the bottom. Yeah. Okay, that's all I got. Any questions?
Do we have any questions online?
If you could share that email address to ask for the links in the chat or verbally.
Oh,
Yes.
If you would share it with me, then I will actually add it to Facebook.
good. Oh, just push the button. It'll turn screen. There you go.
So you said we had this navigation open for all the companies and public in 1994, right? So,
In 94, the program became declassified. In 2005, they turned off the coding
oh, okay.
so that anybody anywhere can get the full GPS information that you can get on your phone today.
Okay. So then we can say, right, that from 1960 until 1994 and then 2000, we had the navigation in place, but it was just not available, right? Because of obvious reasons.
The first, yeah, from the first GPS constellation that was put up was in the early 90s, if I recall correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody really knew about it. There was no, I mean, even if you had a GPS receiver, you would get a scrambled location. It wouldn't come up consistently in the same place. It'd be jumping all around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's okay if you're navigating a ship and, you know, how far is it to Los Angeles? But if you're trying to drive down the street, where do you turn, left or right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Transit.
Yeah.
Before that, we had Loran and we had Transit, and Of course, Loran is just triangulation, and I think
Yeah.
they've decommed all those sites now.
As long
And
as
then
views are
Transit
shared
was
in a
a satellite
respectful
system
manner.
that was similar to GPS but different. And it's how the submarine navy in the Cold War knew where they were
have
at. They'd come up, raise a
No
mast,
issues
wait for the pass to go by, and
with
then
a
they
civil
could resolve that
discourse.
data down to
Period.
a firing
Yeah.
level kind of position.
It wasn't real time.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember in 1990 when I was in the Army for Desert Shield and Desert Storm, they gave us GPSs. The antenna was like a 6-inch plate,
Mhm.
a platter, a big, thick thing. And they said, put it on top of the vehicle and then run the coax down inside. Because in the desert, there's no landmarks, you know.
I had a friend of mine that had one, and during Desert Storm, they turned off the
If you
differential,
want both, I'll give you
and
both for 20.
his GPS. He says this is like the most accurate it's ever been. He had one for I think he had a
And I'll be on your side of
Marine one that he had in
town
his vehicle,
Uh.
but he said during
on
the time that
Saturday.
they were doing all those
Period.
precision bombings and stuff like that, all of a sudden everything was working really sharp on his location. And then afterwards, it all went back to differential for a while.
I have questions. Excuse me, sorry. The selective availability.
No,
The selective availability wasn't it in 1999 in May? President Clinton, he's the one that basically.
Permanently turned it off.
I saw the slide from post-Corona timeline. It
Right.
says 2005. I thought it was 1999 because I had a Magellan 4000 XL, and I was one of the first ones because I do a lot of hunting. It cost me an arm and a leg back in '93 when I bought it. And there was like several. There was Trimble, there was Lawrence, and there was Garmin. I have a Grand Toy
Garmin,
communicator right now that I use. I use it for going back and forth with my family. So, but I was just curious if it was really 1999 or
Well,
2005.
I was hoping to declutter
because
it
I
a
remember
little
the
bit.
day that I knew it was
If you
going to
change your mind, let
happen.
me know.
Estimates the EPE, which is the estimated position area, went down as like 0 to 5 feet.
Yeah.
So, I was just curious.
Let me pull that slide back up here. Let's post. Okay. Yeah, selective availability was removed in May of 2005.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean it didn't work before that. It just meant that you couldn't get the accuracy that the satellites were capable.
I know that it was President Clinton that turned off selective accuracy or selective availability permanently.
Yes, I believe it was 1999. I could be wrong because I was kind of keeping an eye on that because
I had a friend who David knew him, Mike Waters, AA4MW. He was sailing on his sailboat back in that time period. And one of the things that he remarked on was that if you watched the GPS fairly closely, you could tell when something was up in the country or in the world that involved the U.S. military because they would turn selective accuracy off. One of the issues with the first Gulf War was that there weren't enough military receivers, and they had to press into common use the civilian receivers. There was actually a shortage briefly because the military was buying up all of the civilian ones.
Right.
Another little sidelight about the GPS, and one of the reasons why it was originally so expensive, the military had thought that there might be a few civilian uses, and so rather they thought
Thousand.
they wanted to have somebody or have the civilians help pay for the system, and what they did was to actually license the receivers, and as I recall, it was a $50 per receiver fee. Well, they dropped that. I don't remember exactly what the date was, but they decided that they would drop that because they were in the embarrassing situation of being very much in danger of actually turning a profit on GPS. And the military did not deal with showing a profit on something. At any rate, David, I had one question comment for you. I recall in some other talk that I heard several years ago that the CIA/NSA has given up on trying to build their own sensors for the cameras, and what they're doing now is for the spy satellites is using arrays of cell phone sensors, the cell phone cameras.
Yes, I've heard the same. It ends up being cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the challenges of the James Webb sensor.
Now with the answer balloon flight, we actually got a picture on one of our flights on the camera of one of the markers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, down off of down in southern part of the grid.
Uh-huh.
We saw it in the video, and one of our founding members, Jack Crabtree, was the one that pointed out what that was. So we actually landed probably within, I want to say within about 1,200 feet of one. And it was kind of wild. We actually drove over, and I think there's some pictures of us with it.
Yeah, they had some other things that were added to them that I didn't talk about. They had a hole where they put in reflectors, and also with an actual light for using for special purposes.
I wish I had known about the symbol in the middle, because
Yeah.
we just drove up. We didn't really take a good look at it. Now, next time I'm down, if we end up down in that area again, I'm gonna have to go by and get a shot of the actual marker.
Yeah, back in the 70s, they allowed people to rip them out, especially the farmers, where hey, I'm missing a corner of my lot, because they were right near the location of the actual grid that the streets are built on.
Yeah.
So they're right close to that corner. Their location is very precise, as indicated by the survey marks.
In that picture that showed this, all the markers,
Yes.
the green ones are all the ones that are still there, and the red and yellow are gone or partially gone.
Let's go. The green ones, they're confirmed or they're not there.
Oh,
But
one or
that's
the other.
where they're supposed to be. Okay, I mean, as you can see, the grid is very regular, but it's not perfect because they couldn't put it in the middle of a road.
Yeah.
So it's shifted off to the side a little bit by 20, 30 feet sometimes. But anything that's in a yellow circle, which is most of those that are in the south western quad, they're all still out there.
Mm.
And that ones in the mountains are still there, although the marker might be gone. People like to grab those as souvenirs.
Yeah, I think the marker we were near is probably one of the ones in the lower left-hand corner.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I did this presentation, about 5 years ago when I did the first incarnation, and all of the reference materials were what was available at the time. Now, if you do a search for Corona, you get far more information, and a lot more hobbyists have chimed in and made comments, blog posts saying, "Oh, it's all a hoax," or
So another interesting bit, just north of Maricopa, as you're going down 347, heading towards Maricopa from Queen Creek
Yeah.
Road, there used to be a array.
Naval station.
Yeah, that was it the receiver or was it the broadcast?
You know, Rick?
I think it was the broadcaster, if I remember right. And basically, it just sent a signal, or sent a pointed direction up in the air, and they had receivers around that would receive the reflection.
oh,
And it was to identify spacecraft as it overhead.
Yeah, Google Space Fence on that. That's what it was called, Space Fence.
Space fence.
Yes.
Huh.
They pulled it out. What about 9-10 years ago?
Yeah, it was actually replaced with some more advanced technology. I think there's only 2 locations in the world now, rather than, I forget how many were in Space Fence originally.
2013.
Mm.
So it's been 9 years.
9 years. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, we used to drive by it on the way down to the launch sites when we launched down at the Ag Center. Just tell the kids about it.
Huh.
Like a farm.
Yeah.
you were talking about ADS. Yesterday, I got a text from my son. He says, "Where am I?" And so the first thing I would do is I pull up Find My, I see him, and he kept jumping around up in Colorado. And I figured out he was on a plane. He was on Shamrock Farms corporate jet flying from Denver to Scottsdale. And so there aren't too many private jets up there. And you can pull up a map, and this was his plane. And I followed him all the way into the landing in Scottsdale.
Wow.
This app is marvelous. I used it to follow the flights coming out of Afghanistan, and they're all identified by their tail numbers. They didn't turn on the monitoring until they were outside of Afghanistan's airspace, but they flew right over to Dubai or one of the bases over there. This is it's ADS app. Basically, it's just a front end to pull up what would be a web page, because you can go to the web page and get it. But it gives you everything you want to know about any of these flights that are in the air at the moment. Speed, who owns it, whether they're climbing. The altitude is represented by the color. Is if they're at the gate, a commercial's plane is at the gate, they turn it on as soon as they're getting ready to go, and you can watch them take off, and it is very accurate. I use it a lot to track what helicopter just flew over the house. Is it Mesa Police? Is it a hospital flight or something like that?
Huh.
Since we're using the ADS-B trackers for the flights now,
Yeah.
we've actually been playing around with tablets, a little SDR radio, and an ADS-B antenna, 1020 or
Uh-huh.
40 antenna on the roof of the car. And when I was going out to Yuma to do our Yuma flight, I had it running so I could watch. All of a sudden, I noticed I see on the screen, I see a couple of what look like Black Hawk helicopters. I look over and sure enough, they're going by me on the south side of the It's kind of cool because you're picking it up directly from them. Wasn't pulling it offline.
So here's what's going on right now.
Yeah.
A rat's nest.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
American Airlines 2119 Airbus.
Wow.
Behold it.
Cool.